Hello, Peter.
Welcome to the ScreenCrush Break Room. I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about all the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in Spider-Man No Way Home.
Spider-Duck is ready.
Big spoilers for No Way Home are ahead. I will ruin everything. Break's over, I had to get back to the store. The movie begins with the audio from the Far From Home post-credits scene when Mysterio revealed Peter's identity to the world. Now I like that this was shot from a slightly different angle from the ground. This is showing us the event more from MJ's point of view, because this is the movie where Zendaya is able to bring the character front and center. She's not just aloof, she's not an unobtainable love interest, she is an important part of Peter's life and a member of his team. In the Far From Home version, Peter using the F word is cut off by credits, but here it's obscured by a horn honk. Good f***ing idea. As they swing away, notice this person who grabs Peter's leg and falls. Ouch. They swing past two ads for Rogers the Musical, which we first saw in Hawkeye. Now, this scene is happening in the summer and Hawkeye takes place at Christmas. But this is not a continuity error, because Broadway musicals run for a long time if they're a hit. And I guess in the MCU, people really like this. Smash! Smash! But I don't think this is just a simple Easter egg. In Far From Home, Peter was intimidated by the tributes to Iron Man. In this movie, we see tributes to Steve Rogers, like the shield being added to the Statue of Liberty. This shows us that people are wanting to exalt their heroes because it helps them make sense of everything that's happened to the world. In the same way, they're exalting their hero, Mysterio, by blaming Spider-Man for his murder. Peter takes MJ to the top of the Queensboro Bridge, not a great place for Spider-Man and MJs. We even see the Roosevelt Island tram that the Green Goblin tried to destroy.
You gonna pick on a guy trying to save a bunch of kids?
God, I love that movie. It's so good. They end up taking the subway and coming out next to Del Mar's Deli, the best sandwich in Queens Bodega from Homecoming. Nice to see they rebuilt. Now, here's a tiny observation. There is actually not a subway in this area. It's a 7 train above ground. You can see it right here. So that means that they were actually in the sewer, which is why MJ says the trip was gross. Peter finds out that May and Happy broke up. And I gotta tell you, Jon Favreau plays heartbroken very well, just like he did in his big break movie, Swingers.
It's not you, it's me. It's what I'm going through.
In the apartment, there is breaking news on TV, very similar to the breaking news announcement that Venom saw in Let There Be Carnage. And actually, this newscaster in No Way Home is Pat Kiernan, the real-life New York One broadcaster who has appeared in several MCU properties, including Hawkeye.
We are following a breaking news story. A high society gala rocked by an explosion.
During this scene, Peter puts on his I Survived My Trip to New York City shirt that he wore after losing his Stark suit in Homecoming. Jonah calls Peter a spider menace, one of his favorite insults from the comics, and the way they visualize Peter's face, half Parker, half Spider-Man, is how he was often drawn in the comics when his spider sense was triggered. And one of the magazine covers on the TV reads Iron Man Jr. and shows a baby Spider-Man crying. Later, Peter and his friends are arrested by the Department of Damage Control. In the comics, this group was responsible for cleaning up after superhero battles, and in the MCU, Tony Stark commissioned them to clean up after the Chitauri invasion.
The joint venture between Stark Industries and the federal government, the Department of Damage Control, will oversee the collection and storage of alien and other exotic materials.
Now it seems like they're also tasked with handling any superhero policing that needs done, I guess since the Sokovia Accords are no longer a thing. They even know that Nick Fury is in space, which we learned in Far From Home. But you would also think this guy would know that Fury had a Skrull to impersonate him on Earth, but whatever. Now, part of the fallout means that Stark Industries gets raided, and so they can't help Peter out of any jams. And this works great for the movie, because it means that Peter has no safety net, no other heroes that he can call on to help him out, except, Doctor Strange. While he's being interrogated, Peter is wearing his physics is theoretical but fun is real shirt that we saw in Homecoming. And Ned spills his guts about being Peter's guy in the chair, calling back to this role in Homecoming.
I'm looking at porn.
Not that clip, this one.
Guy in the chair.
On TV, we see an old photo of Happy Hogan that features his haircut that we saw in the flashback in Iron Man 3.
Hey, I just noticed these Spider-Man posters. They're great.
Oh, you like those? They're actually exclusive metal posters made by Displate, the sponsor of this video. But they don't just have Spider-Man. There's other Marvel characters, DC, Star Wars, and more than 1.4 million designs.
Whoa.
I know, that's overwhelming, but if you click the link in the description, you'll see that I've curated some of my favorite designs. I have different collections for Hawkeye, Boba Fett, Eternal Spider-Man, and many more.
But wait, if they're metal, how'd they stay on the wall? Do they have Spidey powers?
Well, Doug, they have this easy-to-use magnet mounting system. Each disc plate is also printed on demand, has a fast delivery, and is signed by a master of production. Plus, every time you buy one of these metal posters, Displate plants a tree. So buying a Displate is good for the environment and for your break room. We're offering ScreenCrush fans a special discount. If you click the link in the description, you get your first 1 to 2 Displates for 23% off. 3 or more Displates are 29% off.
Oh, that's real good. That's a lot of money you save.
Back to the Easter eggs. And then we get this massive bombshell reveal. Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock in the actual MCU. Yes. Now, just in case you're not up to speed on this, there were a few Marvel shows released on Netflix, but by a different division of Marvel Entertainment. So those shows were never really embraced by the Marvel Studios films, and eventually they were all canceled. This is actually the first confirmation that they take place in the same shared universe as the movies. So I am so excited for Matt Murdock to be in the MCU. I want my Daredevil team up now. I want to see him defending other superheroes at trial, like he does in the comics. Maybe even arguing in court against She-Hulk. Add in that we've finally seen his arch nemesis, the Kingpin, return in Hawkeye. And a street-level Spider-Man movie is going to be so cool with these characters in it. And this scene is also funny because Jon Favreau played Foggy Nelson in the Daredevil movie back in 2003.
Come on, so you get drunk. Not tonight. I got work to do.
So they moved to Happy's condo in Long Island City, which is also in Queens, just closer to Manhattan. His apartment is filled with Easter eggs. He's watching Downton Abbey like he did in Iron Man 3. There are also a ton of lanyards hanging by his front door, the use of which he strictly enforced in that same movie. And he held on to Dumb E, Tony's personal robot that he actually built in college and loved to insult.
Hi, Dummy. How did you get that cap on your head? You earned it.
And we also saw this robot had sentimental value for Tony, because it was the only thing he recovered from the wreckage of his house. In MJ's room, we see drawings that she made in detention of Peter and of the gym coach. During the conversation, Peter says,
"Ever since I got bit by that spider."
And this is actually the first confirmation we've had that Peter has the same origin in the MCU that he does in the comics and the other movies. I also thought it was sweet that MJ still wears her black dahlia necklace that Peter gave her, even though it's broken.
I actually like it better broken.
And Betty Brant is still the face of the high school news. And side note, if you haven't seen it already, there is a Daily Bugle TikTok account where she is an intern. It's worth checking out.
You never noticed he had extraordinary athletic abilities?
It's a science school, so 2 push-ups is extraordinary athletic abilities.
Betty also says, "Go get him, Tiger," Mary Jane's nickname for Peter in the comics, and the last line she says in Spider-Man 2.
Go get him, Tiger.
Someone in the crowd also says, "Do a flip," a callback to this.
Don't flip! Yeah!
Also, Flash Thompson has dyed his hair blonde like it is in the comics, and he's written a book called Flashpoint, which is funny. Flashpoint is a DC comic storyline that's about to be adapted into a movie. In it, Barry changes the past and creates a new reality where people don't remember some past events. Just like how in this movie, Doctor Strange alters reality to remove all memories of Peter Parker. The teachers have built a shrine to Peter, which includes his quiz team jacket from Homecoming. On the roof, he and MJ are lying near a tag by some graffiti artist named Ditko. This is a neat tribute to Spider-Man's co-creator, Steve Ditko, placing his tag on his creation. Later, the same tag is on the feast truck outside the Sanctum Sanctorum because Ditko also co-created Doctor Strange. In the high school, there is a mural of great scientific minds, which includes Howard Stark here. Pete and his friends talk about going to school in Boston, and Pete's like, "Oh yeah, there's crime there," and Ned says, "Yeah, wicked crime."
My boy's wicked smart.
In the apartment, Pete is rebuilding the Lego Death Star that Ned dropped in Homecoming. And later, Dumb E just knocks it over completely. Peter is upset that he's ruined everyone's lives, and it takes a college rejection to make him seek out Doctor Strange. Now, this is adapted from a couple events in the comics. Peter revealed his secret identity in the comic book event Civil War, which in a roundabout way led to Aunt May being shot. He asked Doctor Strange for help, and he actually says he can't do it. So Peter has to turn to Mephisto.
Not the bears!
Mephisto agrees to save Aunt May's life in exchange for Peter's marriage to Mary Jane, because apparently Satan hates true love.
This is true love. Think this happens every day?
Fans and critics hated this storyline, and it was later rolled back in ways that aren't really important. Basically, it turned out that Doctor Strange did help everyone forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, kind of. Though, I gotta say, this was unpopular, but it did the comic book a lot of good. Taking away the main character's marriage actually gave them a lot more story opportunities, like Curb Your Enthusiasm. The other comic storyline this borrows from is Happy Birthday, when Doctor Strange is trying to conduct a spell and Peter won't shut up and he disrupts the spell. When Peter sees sees the Sanctum, Doctor Strange's theme plays, which is cool because Michael Giacchino has composed both of these films. The Sanctum is covered in snow because one of the gateways that we saw in Doctor Strange was left open. We also learned the hilarious new truth that Wong is now the Sorcerer Supreme, because Steven blipped. Now that's awesome and it's good for a laugh, but why is the Sorcerer Supreme hustling a super-powered cage fight in China?
Maybe you'll start controlling those punches like we practiced.
Strange reminds Peter that he no longer has the Time Stone, but he does still have the Eye of Agamotto. So that relic had more magical purposes than to just house the stone. It's just that it was so powerful that it was powerful enough to house and protect an Infinity Stone. Now we talked a lot about the mechanics of this spell and the multiverse in our Ending Explained video, so I'm not going to get too far into the space-time continuum and time travel in this video. But Wong says that the spell travels the dark borders between the known and unknown universes. In other words, the dark borders of copyright law, the nebulous spaces that exist twixt the filmmakers and the lawyers. I thought what Wong said was interesting because it adds a new layer to the MCU. Basically, the multiverses that we saw in Loki, What If, and Endgame are all very alike. They branch off each other when a Nexus event occurs or a Nexus being strays off their path. But these spider universes are not part of any of these same branches. They are wholly independent, like the separate timelines that we see that make up the one sacred timeline. Strange reminds Wong of the full moon party at Kamar-Taj, the city where they both trained under the Ancient One. Steven brings Peter to his basement and tells him the Sanctum is built on a site that's thousands of years old that exists at the crossroads of all realities, and they shot an episode of The Equalizer there. The Equalizer was an 80s spy show. You know what, it's not important. Let's move on. When Strange conducts the spell, he draws a thin line through the air, like the spell he used to find Odin in Thor Ragnarok. Now, it could be that this method of casting a spell is used to focus on individuals. There's another callback to Ragnarok when we see the apprentices trying to fix the artifact that Thor breaks here. After the spell goes wrong, Strange traps it in a 12-sided figure called a dodecagon, which, from the side, looks like a hexagon.
Not the beast!
Seriously, there are a lot of hexagons in the MCU. Peter runs off to find the MIT Chancellor. Now, I actually really like that this was his #1 school, but not just because it's MIT. It's also where Tony Stark went to college, and it's where he gave his speech in Civil War.
Help me out. What's the MIT mission statement? To generate, disseminate, and preserve knowledge.
And then Otto frickin' Octavius returns on a bridge over the Hudson River where he died in Spider-Man 2. How great was it seeing Alfred Molina again? And side note, the de-aging they used on him and Willem Dafoe is flawless. This character is the second best Alfred Molina villain ever, right behind this guy.
Ricky Springfield, the fireman!
When Peter's spider sense goes off, it's portrayed with a dolly zoom, just like when he felt Oc's presence here in Spider-Man 2. And Doctor Octopus's theme from Spider-Man 2 plays, one of many musical callbacks to the scores of Denny Elfman and Hans Zimmer. Like seriously, all through the movie. It's great. The first thing Doc does is ask about his machine.
What have you done with my machine?
Meaning the fusion reactor that he was building in Spider-Man 2. He even repeats his line about the power of a sun.
In the palm of my hand.
Now, we already made a video theorizing that this Doc could actually be a variant because he wasn't wearing any of these clothes in that scene. And you know what? He totally still could be a variant. They all could be.
But that's not important right now.
Peter is forced to web a car to a bridge, an echo of this scene in The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, Doc Ock is not surprised to see Peter's nanotech. You know why? Because it's already theoretical in the Raimi universe.
I read all your research on nanotechnology. Really brilliant.
After Peter takes control of Doc's arms, Doc can't touch him. This is a nice reverse of what Doctor Octopus always does to Spider-Man in the comics, using his arms to keep Spider-Man from landing a punch. And then Doc tells the arms, "Listen to me," echoing his last scene in Spider-Man 2.
Listen to me now.
Later, Doc will reference the exact point when he left his timeline, when he had Peter by the throat, here. And that was also just moments after he found out that Peter was Spider-Man. But it was before he shut down his own machine and redeemed himself. So this guy on the bridge is a fully villainous version of Doctor Octopus. And then Norman Osborn shows up with a pumpkin bomb, and following this same chain of logic, this is Norman right after the Thanksgiving dinner.
How did you say that happened?
Bike messenger.
When he found out that Peter was Spider-Man. Doctor Strange brings Peter and Doctor Octopus back to his sanctum by sliding his portal like we saw him do in Ragnarok.
All right, bye-bye.
Otto asks where he learned to do magic, and Strange replies, lots of birthday parties. Maybe a nod to this.
Your powers are quaint. You must be popular with children.
Or this.
What is your job exactly besides making balloon animals?
Strange already has the lizard in the dungeon, who probably came to this reality right after this scene. Pete turns his suit inside out, resembling the black and gold suit that he wore in the comics. Now in the comics, this suit was nearly invincible, and Peter had to wear it when he temporarily lost his spider sense. It was also during the time when "no one dies" became his mantra, something that's reflected in this movie, when he insists on saving the lives of all the villains. Then he fights Electro, who pulls a Dr. Manhattan and reforms himself after being disintegrated in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Except, get this. This is not the same Electro. The lizard actually references this, talking about how Max used to have a comb over and now he's different. Max kind of says that, oh, it's this new universe and I feel really good. But Max also never finds out Peter's secret identity. So maybe this is a variant of Max, or he comes back to life in the Amazing timeline and then later on he learns who Peter is. Either way, the new version of the character is a much better fit for Jamie Foxx.
You're not gonna take this away from me.
When they fight, Flint Marko, aka Sandman, arrives to help Peter, because at the end of Spider-Man 3, they were basically on good terms. Flint does pull a heel turn though, which is also fitting for the character. In the comics, Sandman was a villain who became a hero and an Avenger before turning bad again. Alright, in this alley... Oh no! Oh no, the multiverse, it's opening! I'm being pulled into another YouTube channel!
We cut to Norman Osborn in an alleyway, and we can catch him going back and forth with a goblin mask, showing the two sides of his personality. He ends up smashing the helmet and leaving it in the trash, alongside what I'm guessing are a bunch of other movie YouTube channels. You trash ass suckers. Now this shot itself actually mirrors the one in the Raimi verse, in which Peter left behind the suit in the trash too, and it's meant to show that Norman is now leaving the goblin behind, even though he comes back with a vengeance. See that? That's your aunt. You sucker.
That was weird. Back to the Easter eggs. May meets Norman at Feast, the homeless shelter that she runs in the comics and the recent Spider-Man video game. When Otto and Norman recognized each other, I felt like it was recreating this moment.
Their taste in wine in general is very poor. Now, we gotta be...
Now, Strange is not sympathetic to the villains at all. He says...
If he dies, he dies.
Revealing the same pragmatism that he showed at Infinity War when he said that he would let a teenager die to protect the universe.
If it comes to saving you, or the kid, or the time stone, I will not hesitate to let either of you die.
When Peter runs off with the spell, Strange tries to stop him with his energy whips, his sling ring, and finally by forcing his astral self out of his body like the Ancient One did to him. But then we get this really fun twist where Peter's body is able to elude Strange because of his spider sense. Strange doesn't understand what's happening. He says this is impossible. Now this could be because in the comics, his spider sense is not a physical ability. It's eventually revealed that he's actually sensing vibrations through this great metaphysical web that stretches throughout the multiverse. Basically, the multiverse is connected through this metaphorical / literal web, and every reality has a spider totem or a Spider-Man who can sense these same vibrations. In fact, when this is happening, you can actually see wavy lines coming out of the head of Peter's astral form, just like how his spider sense is drawn in the comics. In the mirror dimension, Peter recognizes the Archimedean spiral and uses it to trap Strange. I love when the MCU manages to combine science and magic.
Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
Also during the fight, Strange attaches his cape to Spider-Man, which reminded me a lot of the Marvel Zombies episode of What If. So, when Peter decides to help the villains, Norman says,
"You know, I'm something of a scientist myself."
Which is a fun callback to Spider-Man 1. But Lizard warns him that when you try to fix people, there are consequences, like when he tried to regrow his arm and became Lizard. And I just want to throw this out there. I don't like Smart Lizard. I like the character better in the comics, where he sounds like this.
This was once a bear.
Ned asks if there are other Neds, which, in the comics, there are. Ned Leeds was the villain, the Hobgoblin. I mean, until they retconned it, long story. But later on, this is alluded to when Toby Maguire freaks him out after he says that his best friend was a villain who died tragically in his arms. Oh, and I forgot. In the basement, MJ finds a goatee guard, showing that Strange doesn't use magic to get that perfect shave. In Happy's apartment, there is a fabricator like Peter used in Far From Home, and it's powered by an arc reactor. Interesting thing to note here, this looks like the arc reactor that Tony threw into the ocean at the end of Iron Man 3. That's the one that contained the new element that he created in Iron Man 2, which actually, according to the novelization, was vibranium. So Tony, you didn't create nothing, man. Also, behind the fabricator, we can see Stark Industry blueprints. To fix Doc Ock, Peter has to repair his inhibitor chip, which actually locks into place with the same pins that we saw in Spider-Man 2. May and Doc Ock share a little moment in the kitchen, which I thought was great because they actually dated in the comics. Seriously. Sandman and Electro bond over their very similar origin stories, which narratively was a cool shortcut to them bonding and teaming up together. And it was also hilarious. Then we get this whole sequence where Willem Dafoe goes insane, and it is great. He takes every punch that Peter can throw at him, and the entire time he looks like he's having the time of his life. By the time it's over, he sports a new look, wearing a purple hood. Now this combines the purple hood of the Green Goblin from the comics and also the shape of the Hobgoblin's hood. And it's way scarier than the Green Goblin Power Rangers mask. Norman Osborn has always been Peter's greatest enemy. In the comics, he killed Gwen Stacy, and here, he kills Aunt May. But before she dies, in a nice piece of acting from Marissa Tomei, she asserts that she is Peter's moral compass, saying that he's done the right thing. And finally, she drops that iconic line.
With great power comes great responsibility.
A couple years ago, ScreenCrush's Matt Singer, who literally wrote the book on Spider-Man, wrote that these new movies don't skip Peter's origin story. They are his origin story. And this is the moment when Peter learns the greatest lesson that his origin has to teach. Now, Aunt May has died in other media before. In the comics, she once had a really tender death, revealing to Peter that she always knew he was Spider-Man and telling him that she was proud of him. Then we go to Ned, who has learned how to use Doctor Strange's sling ring. There are a few hints that he may actually become a sorcerer later on in the future of the MCU. He wears Strange's cape. His grandmother says they have magic in their family, and he says that he can sometimes feel tingling in his fingers. But most importantly, Strange seems to acknowledge Ned's talent when he gives him an interested nod of approval. But all of this leads up to the return of Andrew Garfield as his universe's Spider-Man. I hope that you were able to stay away from all the leaks and this was a total surprise, because it was very cool. So this concept of having different Spider-Men appear together goes back to the 90s animated show.
Am I going mad?
And there was a brilliant Spider-Verse crossover by Dan Slott, and most recently, the spectacular Into the Spider-Verse movie. But it was so cool to see this happen in live action with franchises that we've all felt some connection to. Then Toby shows up, and that youth pastor line floored me. Andrew and Toby bond over their favorite skyscrapers, but Peter's favorite place is near his home in Queens. I love this because Peter is still a kid who hasn't lived in the city yet, and when he's in trouble, he just wants to be home. We also get a little info on the lives of Andrew and Toby. Andrew says that after Gwen died, he stopped pulling his punches, which makes sense. That universe was always a little more grounded and gritty than the other movies. And I kind of expected Toby to show off a wedding ring, but instead he says that it's complicated with MJ, but they make it work. I was really hoping for a post-credits scene though where he goes to his own reality and he's got a teenage daughter and she's Spider-Girl. Anyways, Spider-Andrew says that he's already cured Kurt Connors once back in The Amazing Spider-Man, and Toby says that he's been thinking about how to cure Norman for years. And this was really sad because Harry also took this same serum and it also drove him insane. He even had a touch of that goblin amnesia, but it was created by a knock on the head. The Osborn family are one of Peter's greatest failures, and now he's happy to finally be able to make it right. And just for a second, when Ned calls out for Peter, they all do that point thing from the meme. Amazing, which, yeah, later on Toby does call Andrew amazing because his movies are the amazing. You get it. Later on, Toby complains about his back problem, which he has in real life, after sustaining an injury while filming Seabiscuit. There were even rumors that he would be recast in Spider-Man 2 by Mysterio himself, Jake Gyllenhaal. In fact, that's what this joke is about.
My back! Oh, my back!
Now, all the Spider guys are amazed by Toby's organic web shooters, and he mentions that he once did get a web block back in Spider-Man 2 when he had an existential crisis. Andrew says he relates because he also stopped being Spider-Man for a while. Then they ask if the webbing comes out of anywhere else, and I think they're actually thinking of the Brown Widow.
Mark Knopfler crapped his pants!
Toby also mentions the black alien goo that he fought, meaning Venom. Peter name checks Thanos, and Andrew brings up the Russian guy in a rhino machine at the end of Amazing 2. And it's just all good fun. Like most Marvel movies, I am happiest when I just get to watch extraordinary people hang out and chat.
So you became an actor because you thought the monkeys were actually
Riding horses? I did.
But then the villains appear. Max Dillon takes on a more comic-accurate look, wearing green and yellow, and when his energy spikes, it produces yellow lightning in the shape of Electro's comic book mask. The Spider Guys get their butts kicked because they can't work together, and Tom name drops the Avengers.
You're an Avenger now.
And when Toby got excited, I thought he was going to reference these Avengers. But instead, they ask him if that's a band, kind of calling back to this line of banners.
Like a band? Like the Beatles?
Doc shows up to do a face turn, another neat nod to the comics, where he actually becomes the superior Spider-Man for a long, terrific run by Dan Slott. Sandman is cured by a miniature cyclotron like the one that turned him into sand to begin with. Andrew has a heart-to-heart with Max, calling back to their original connection.
You're not a nobody. You're somebody. Like that. All right, listen to me.
And man, I loved it when he said that he thought Spider-Man would be black, because, of course, we all know that in the multiverse there is a black Spider-Man, Miles Morales. But this is also a plot hole that I mentioned earlier. Electro didn't know who Spider-Man was under the mask. So why is he even here?
I'm not even supposed to be here today!
Let me know what you think down in the comments. When the lizard is cured, his eyes change color just like in The Amazing Spider-Man. When Otto sees Toby, he asks, "How are you?" And he repeats his line from Spider-Man 2.
Trying to do better.
In the final showdown with the Goblin, he knocks MJ off the scaffolding, and the shot composition and score almost exactly match Gwen's death, but the shot is turned on its side. A way to say that this time it's going to be different, and Andrew redeems himself from not saving Gwen. And this scene made an emotional connection with me in a way that the Amazing films never did.
Stay with me, stay with me.
Andrew Garfield, guys, he's great. Go see Tick, Tick, Boom. Then, Strange returns as reality begins to crack open. The appearance of this looks an awful lot like the multiverse multiplying unchecked at the end of Loki. I thought this was a great way to show what this would look like when the multiverse is opening in front of you, rather than watching it from the sides. Several figures appear in the cracks, including someone with a spear, maybe Kraven the Hunter, and other people who have Doc Ock arms. But the main event on the card is Peter #1 versus Norman Osborn. Now it's symbolic that Peter is fighting this battle on the back of Cap's shield. Steve Rogers fought because he didn't like bullies. Sometimes he had to kill, but he didn't like to. Here, Peter just wants to kill the Goblin. He is out for revenge, and he's about to become the murderer that everyone thinks he is. But then, Toby Maguire steps in to be his new moral compass. Remember, he also went to that dark place thinking that he killed Sandman.
Good riddance.
I also loved his death fake out and how Toby brushes it off by saying, "I've been stabbed before." Then Peter decides to make a huge sacrifice. He gives up his life of Peter Parker to save the universe. This is very similar to the endings of Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man, where each Peter chose not to be with the woman they love to protect her. Actually, except for Andrew, he promised for 5 seconds and then he said this thing about not keeping promises.
Don't make promises you can't keep, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, but those are the best kind.
And when Strange casts the spell, he surrounds himself with runes, like we saw in WandaVision.
In a given space, only the witch who cast them can use her magic.
Essentially creating them around him and then spreading them out around the world. The movie ends at Christmas time, the same time actually that Hawkeye is set. Peter decides not to tell MJ the truth after seeing the band-aid on her head, but she's actually still wearing the Black Dahlia necklace, so part of him will always be with her. When Pete visits Aunt May's grave, he sees Happy. And again, we explained the forgetting spell in our ending explained video, you should check that out.
Let's do it!
Happy also says that he lost a friend a while back, and he means Tony. It's pretty tragic that Peter also lost the same friend, but he can't talk to Happy about it. In fact, now he can't talk to anyone about it because he doesn't know anyone. And then we get this soft reboot of the franchise, with Peter having no ties to Stark Industries, sewing his own cloth suit, living in a crappy apartment owned by a landlord that just wants
rent.
We also see that he's studying for his GED, but he's kept a couple mementos. The coffee cup from MJ and the Emperor Palpatine that belonged to Ned.
Join me and together we'll build my new Lego Death Star.
This also really got to me. The closing credits are actually drawings of a wormhole on graph paper, theoretically how interdimensional travel is possible. And what a terrific, tragic ending. It turns out that the title, No Way Home, was not about the villains. It was about Peter Parker. He has no way home, no life to return to. Great movie, and all around, best Spider-Man trilogy. But what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.